This just in, you are looking at obviously a very disturbing live shot.
I can hear you. The rest of the world hears you. And the people.
The United States is conducting an operation to kill Osama bin Laden.
Today, the World Health Organization officially announced that this is a global pandemic.
Greetings to everyone on this late Tuesday night. I'm going to try to keep this video short and to the point so you can get the facts and a bit of commentary so that you can decide for yourself what the heck is going on around us. Over the last 4 to 5 days, I've been getting bombarded with the chaotic thought forms put out by the Draconians to try to get humanity, or at least here in the United States, engaged into another psychodrama-based marketing campaign. We are going to dive into the pros and cons of this. We will start with the pros. This campaign of fear deals with the SAFET Act, which was signed into law by Governor J.B. Pritzker on January 22nd, 2021. Yes, you heard that correctly. That is almost 2 years ago. The Illinois Safety, Accountability, Fairness, and Equity Today Act implements sweeping reform impacting many aspects of the criminal justice system, including pre-arrest diversion, policing, pretrial, sentencing, and corrections. Many provisions of the act took effect July 1st, 2021. So all this fear-mongering you're hearing and many of the provisions have already took effect over a year ago. You see? The act covers 3 areas of criminal justice reform: policing, pretrial, and corrections. In the area of the use of force, the act offers new standards for when police use force, requires officers to provide aid after using force, requires officers to intervene if other officers use unauthorized or excessive force, prohibits police access to any military equipment surplus program or purchasing specific types of equipment, requires publishing of any purchase, request, or receipt of equipment through any military purchasing program, expands use of and changes guidelines and requirements for body-worn cameras and who may access, review, or delete footage, expands officer training on topics including crisis intervention, de-escalation, use of force, high-risk traffic stops, implicit bias, racial and ethnic sensitivity training, and emergency response, mandates use of force reporting to FBI National Use of Force database, so they're going to keep track of them as well, requires reporting of deaths in police custody and due to use of force. So far, this doesn't sound bad at all. If we are to live within a society with accountability, being accountable, some don't like to hear that word, it seems to me anyhow that only a certain or specific type of psychological pathology would find fault with what I just read. Those who are attracted to positions of power specifically to harm others in some way or another find massive, high-level amounts of issues with what was just stated, because that makes it so they can't do what they have been doing to, especially to certain communities, for quite a while. Now, to go to the areas of complaints in misconduct, the Act creates statewide decertification process for officers, allows the Attorney General to investigate, initiate civil lawsuits, and enforce settlements against police agencies that have a pattern of depriving individuals of their rights, creates stricter body camera regulations, and a Class 3 felony for clear and willful attempts to obstruct justice. So let's just say something happened, right? And regardless if who was right or wrong, right? The supposed person getting arrested or the officer, right? You want to see that footage, and you attempt to see that footage and mysteriously got deleted, right? We've heard, for those who keep track of some of these cases a little bit, no matter what race is involved, it's very strange that that happens, right? Well, this is going to regulate that and automatically charge them with a class 3 felony if it mysteriously just ends up deleted. Wow. So it allows for investigation of anonymous complaints against officers. It bans the destruction of police misconduct records. Allows the complaint filings against police officers without sworn affidavits or other legal documentation. Removes the requirements that officers under investigation must be informed of complainants' names or of the officer in charge of the investigation. So in some cases, have been investigative journalists on YouTube who have actually shown when they wanted to file a report against an officer for excessive force that they wanted to know the person's name, and of course that's so they could intimidate them and stuff. And many of those people did get intimidated, and it's documented. You could search YouTube for this stuff, and you'll find it yourself. Okay, so that's another good thing. I could see why a certain pathology would have an issue with this. Shout out to those who actually do things within the matrix, at least in a way that shines a better light than those who prefer or attempt to do the opposite. So let's see here. Where am I at? Prohibits local governments from retaliating against employees who report improper government actions. You all will be surprised how much money laundering goes on and so forth within government. And so, especially those accountants out there, if you were to look at the CAFR, C-A-F-R, you'll also be surprised how much money your local municipality, your local city government actually makes, who's not even a big city. And when you start to look, for those who really love numbers, and you start to really look into the numbers, you start to come up at times with some discrepancies. Okay? So if you work for these government entities, it allows you to report without the fear of retaliation, of course, you being fired or even worse. Expands notification of police misconduct to the Illinois State Training and Standards Board. Makes data on misconduct more accessible. Requires a publicly available database for any police misconduct that results in decertification. So a public database, so you can see those officers, because of whatever reason, pretty much lost the ability to be an officer. That's interesting. Okay, now you come up with your own decision, but in my commentary here, just off the cuff, this is wow. So far, sounds like what you would expect for such a working path that deals with the public and it deals with the criminality that may be around. You would think these types of responsibilities, this type of legality would be surrounded and concerning it and dealing with it from the start anyway. But we know why that was not, because again, a certain pathology is attracted to being an officer and what they do. Not all officers are bad, but you all know and get what I'm saying. Okay, so based on what I just read, I can see whole departments resigning or just not doing their job at all, like a form of silent strike due to being held at this level of accountability. Remember, folks, this was the pros. Okay, so this is the positives. So one more aspect here. Again, that's the pretrial area. The act abolishes cash bail, prevents the results of a risk assessment from being the sole basis for a detention decision, and informs the accused person of the tool. Establishes a pretrial practices data oversight board to oversee data collection and analysis. Establishes the domestic violence pretrial practices working group. Adds notification of pretrial hearing to crime victims. Changes the offense class for violations of conditions of pretrial release. changes pretrial release procedures, including release on own warrant alternatives and conditions of release, including electric monitoring and home confinement revocation. Modification and sanctions. May revoke pretrial release under certain circumstances. So it's not like, in reading this, it's not like everyone is just going to be let free for committing crimes or being accused of a crime. Many people still will be held due to the violent acts they are accused of. Okay? But what we are witnessing with this is a movement toward the very saying innocent until proven guilty. If you are truly innocent until proven guilty, then you shouldn't be held behind bars, sometimes for years, awaiting a trial. Because I've heard all types of horror stories of people who did not have enough to actually bail out, and it's almost like the system forgot about them, and they were in there. There's something to the, or a statute or provision that deals with, there's a certain reasonable expectation to having a speedy trial, and they would be in the jail awaiting trial for so long that about time their trial date comes, the case gets thrown out because they were in for so long and it violated that statute. Okay, so this does give benefits to those who may be accused, so they can work to pay for a legal defense versus being stuck behind bars, losing their livelihood, their residence, okay, and who knows what else, all because they couldn't bail out. From what I can find, it seems some of the bail criteria was selected based on statistics. These crimes were ones where people on bail didn't reoffend at high rates, and ones which disproportionately impacted people in poverty. Okay. Now we're going to discuss some of the cons, or at least perceived cons. All right. We will start by watching a short town hall meeting that took place in Orland Park, Illinois, which is a southwest suburb of Chicago. And then we're going to go to a Fox News broadcast.
As of January 1st, 2023, the following things will go into effect, and people need to be aware of this. It abolishes cash bail for almost every offense. This includes, but isn't limited to, kidnapping, armed robbery, second-degree murder, drug-induced homicide, aggravated DUI, threatening a public official, and aggravated fleeing and eluding. Offenders released on electronic monitoring have to be in violation for 48 hours before law enforcement can act. They could almost drive to Alaska before we can even look for them. It denies victims their constitutional rights. And keep this in mind, businesses and homeowners. Officers will no longer be able to remove trespassers from your residence or your businesses. Someone could decide to live in your shed, and all we can do is give them a ticket. You have to decide what level of force is required to remove them and whether or not it's legal. This is a massive threat to the residents of Orland Park, Cook County, and Illinois.
Discuss is Daquan Bruce, Concerned Communities for America Executive Director. Daquan, good to see you. Thank you for being here. Is there no doubt, or maybe put it this way, is there any doubt in your mind that these no bail laws do more harm than good?
Absolutely. You know, we talk about the need for criminal justice reform, and to an extent, there is a significant need. However, what we see with these laws is that we're giving criminals a get-out-of-jail-free card when we say that the bail system needs to be overhauled and there needs to be easier ways to pay bail. Bail is set the way it is for a reason. But then, two, in addition to this law, there's a whole list of crimes that are going to be non-detainable offenses. These include burglary, robbery, kidnapping, threatening a public official, and even second-degree murder. So with these laws, what we're essentially doing is saying that, there is a threshold for how far you can go. And even if you push the boundaries, you can just get out of jail and do it again if you like.
Well, these people are not living in the real world. I mean, they don't realize that the attorneys for these criminals are going to use everything they can. I mean, that's what they're paid for. That's their job. I'm not criticizing them for using the law to their own purposes, but that's what they do. And in the real world, violent criminals get out and do the same things or even worse than they have before. But here's what Governor Pritzker said about this new law. I just want to roll the tape and get your reaction. Go ahead.
This legislation marks a substantial step toward dismantling the systemic racism that plagues our communities, our state, and our nation, and brings us closer to true safety, true fairness, and true justice.
You know, Daquan, one could argue that if you're looking for racism, there's nothing more racist than policies that lead to the death of minorities in America. And that's what these laws do.
Absolutely. There is nothing just, and there's nothing, promoting safety about allowing individuals who choose to break the law to threaten and to hurt innocent people, allow them back on the streets to do it again. That's the opposite of justice, and that's the opposite of promoting safety within our community, and that's something that Concerned Communities for America, we seek to combat. We understand that the only way to achieve true safety and true justice is to empower the men and women and support the men and women on the streets who are promoting safety, and that is the men and women in blue, and that is also community leaders who are actually providing resources to help pull people out of poverty, to help individuals who are experiencing, situations where they may feel that the only way that they can provide for themselves is to go out and commit a crime, and not allow them to do it
and
again.
Also do work in the jails. I mean, do prison ministry is what we used to call it, where you go into the jails, you work with offenders whose lives can be turned around. Nobody wants to be in jail. You can do that, but to just let violent criminals out, to give them a pass is crazy. By the way, even in states that have tried this where it's failed miserably, like New York, you still have Governor Hochul. She just came out with an op-ed last spring about our no bail law. I just want to put that up on the screen. In 2019, this is what she says. In 2019, the state legislature enacted landmark reforms to our bail laws. The reforms were successful. Fewer New Yorkers are kept behind bars just because they can't pay, and we've saved taxpayer dollars in the process. Whoopee! We're saving money by letting violent criminals out of jail. It's crazy.
Exactly. And while they're, toting the number of people that aren't in jail, what she's not addressing is the amount of crime that has risen in New York and that can be correlated to this law. You have, the mayor of New York City calling for support and getting guns off the street because there are now more unregistered guns in the city of New York than there have ever been at any time before. If this law really worked, then crime would, in theory, go down. But what we've seen is that there are more repeat offenders, there are more new offenders, and there are a much larger variety of crimes taking place in the city of New York. And
cops know it. And the mayor of New York is a former cop, so he knows it. You have cops in Illinois who are furious. There's a Johnson County sheriff who just said about what's going to happen in Illinois. Anyone sitting in jail right now with all these pending charges, they're going to be let out. The gates are open, and they're going to be let out into the streets. So they know what's going to come, and it ain't going to be pretty. I mean, it's going to make things worse, not better.
Absolutely.
So we took the time to read the main points of the law above. So this over-the-top fear-mongering seems to be trying to convince us that criminals are going to be roaming in hordes, killing off people, and committing other heinous acts. Guess what, folks? This is already happening around us to a lesser degree, right? So it's not like it's not already happening to at least a certain degree, okay? By design, of course. Those who govern this society are not good stewards. Hence why we see poisons put into the water supply, factories placed on freshwater sources and then proceed to poison those sources that people drink from, etc. Spraying chemicals via their geoengineering programs that are 2/3 the cause of bee colony collapse and other disappearances of wildlife. Because society is controlled like in a game by these entities, we know by historically, we know also by the data, that this overall is just another piece on the chessboard in this game within the four corners of the realm. The school systems en masse have become nothing more than daycares with drag queens and underhanded schemes. So yes, the criminal element will more than likely grow. Why? Because much of society has lost the spark of what makes one human. Understanding that we are much stronger together than apart. This has been trained, indoctrinated since birth. Everyone is out now to get the bag, falling deeper into the clutches of the Matrix. If there was a choice, I hope that instead you would choose to fall within the clutches of yourself, to embrace your vortexian spin and to dance on the winds of your heart. And with that, family, you decide what this means to you. Think about it, and let's talk about it. Take care.